Hello, today we'll be going over our study where we took a look at the effect of a heel lift on peak acceleration during a 90% 1 rep max back squat. So to start with some background, the squat is a daily functional movement. You're going to see all different types of people performing a squat, whether it be an individual squatting down to pick something up off the floor, someone standing up out of a chair, or an individual just going to the gym trying to get their legs stronger. All different types of people perform the squat. And because of this, it's important to understand ways to optimize it. Weightlifting shoes are marketed as a way to do just that, to optimize the squat. And this is primarily due to the biomechanical benefits that the addition of a heel lift provide. And the heel lift is a major component of a weightlifting shoe. It's been shown in research that when squatting with a heel lift, there's a reduced demand for required dorsiflexion to achieve an optimal bottom position of a squat. Additionally, the heel lift will promote increased anterior translation of the knee and subsequently less posterior translation of the hip joint. So on the left, this is an individual squatting without a heel lift. And then on the right, this is representative of somebody squatting with a heel lift. And I'd like to draw your attention to the knees here. As you can see on the left, the individual's knees are not as far anterior as they are on the right when the individual has the heel lift. And this essentially results in a more upright posture throughout the trunk, reduces the moment arm on the back, and therefore reduces the torque acting on the back. Also, changes in EMG activity have been noted based on the position of the knee. So Macram et al. Demonstrated that when the knees are not allowed to track anteriorly during the squat, there's reduced quadriceps activity EMG. And Lorenzetti et al., a different study by Lorenzetti et al., demonstrated that when the knees are allowed to track anteriorly during a squat, there is an improved stretch reflex at the quadriceps. So there have been biomechanical changes noted in research. However, changes in force production and acceleration with the addition of a heel lift have not been looked at as much in the literature. And this is kind of where our study comes in. So we initially wanted to look at changes in force production. However, due to the limitations of our resources, we thought that it would be too difficult to accurately measure force production with a squat. So we decided to look at acceleration, because acceleration can be directly related to force with the formula force equals mass times acceleration. So that brings us to our purpose. The purpose of our study was to analyze the effect of a heel lift on peak acceleration during a 90% 1 rep max back squat. As for our hypotheses, we had two. The first being that we hypothesized the addition of a heel lift would increase peak acceleration during the 90% 1 rep max back squat. And the second being that we hypothesized the largest increases in peak acceleration would occur in subjects with limited closed kinetic chain dorsiflexion.
For participants to be included in our study, they had to be between the ages of 18 and 26 years old and a member of the Clark University football team. To be excluded from our study, they could not have a musculoskeletal injury within the past 4 weeks or have a known neurologic condition. Instrumentation used in our study, the heel lift that we used measured to be 2.5 centimeters, which is equivalent to the weightlifting shoe that Max discussed in the background. We use standard weightlifting equipment that Clark University has downstairs in their weight room that the football team uses. We use the inclinometer phone app to measure closed kinetic chain ankle dorsiflexion range of motion. We use the phone tripod to steady an iPhone 11 when taking a lateral view for video analysis, which we use the weightlifting analysis app. Ultimately, we had 24 male participants in our study, and once they passed inclusion and exclusion criteria, and read and signed the informed consent form, their closed kinetic chain ankle dorsiflexion range of motion was recorded. And it should be noted that at this time, participants were asked to take their shoes off, as the ankle range of motion measurements and the squats were performed barefoot. This took out any heel lift that the participants might receive from the shoes that they were wearing. So the only heel lift provided was the heel lift that we provided for them. They're broken up into two groups randomly, not based on the closed kinetic chain ankle dorsiflexion range of motion as this graph may allude to. It was already previously randomized what group they would belong to. They all performed a standardized warm-up, 5 reps of their 70% 1 rep max, followed by 5 reps of their 80% 1 rep max. Group 1 performed the squat without the heel lift first, and then followed by a squat with the heel lift. And group 2, it was just the opposite. They performed the first squat with the heel lift and the second without. And it should be noted that the only cueing that we provided them was to perform the squat as fast as possible. And we designed our study this way because we wanted to take out the variable of fatigue. The picture on the left here is how we obtained closed kinetic chain ankle dorsiflexion range of motion. Obviously, we were out of the way for this picture, but when we actually conducted our study, we visually inspected that the heel was down so we could get accurate measurements using the inclinometer phone app. On the left, we have a picture of a squat being performed with the heel lift that we used in our study. And on the right, we have a picture of a squat performed without the heel lift. We used video analysis of the squats using an iPhone 11, and the application we used was Weightlifting Analysis app.
For data analysis, we used the SPSS software, and we ran 3 types of statistical tests. The first was a paired t-test, where we compared the peak acceleration of the squat without the heel lift and with the heel lift, using the athletes as their own control. Then we ran 2 Pearson R correlation tests. The first Pearson R correlation test was comparing the difference in the peak acceleration, which was calculated by subtracting the peak acceleration without the heel lift from the peak acceleration with the heel lift. We used that value to compare to their closed kinetic chain ankle dorsiflexion. For the second Pearson R correlation test, we compared difference in peak acceleration again, but this time to the athletes' weight lifted during the study. Then we ran 2 independent sample t-tests. We compared the same variables as in the Pearson R correlation tests. However, this time we divided the dorsiflexion and the weight lifted into 2 groups, having a high and low closed kinetic chain dorsiflexion and a high and low weight lifted. So first, with the paired t-test, you can see the mean peak acceleration without the heel wedge was 3.01 meters per second squared, whereas the mean peak acceleration with the heel wedge was 3.19 meters per second squared. So you can see a slight increase in the peak acceleration with the heel wedge. However, we found no statistical significance as our p-value was 0.15. For the Pearson R correlation test comparing the closed kinetic chain ankle dorsiflexion and the peak acceleration difference, you can see in the graph here we found a weak negative correlation found between those 2 variables. However, we found no statistical significance as our p-value was 0.06. However, this is very close and trending towards statistical significance. So what this means is as an athlete has worse closed kinetic chain ankle dorsiflexion, their potential for the heel lift to benefit them increases. Then for the second Pearson R correlation test, comparing the amount of weight lifted and the peak acceleration difference, you can see in the graph that there's essentially no correlation. We found no statistical significance as our p-value was 0.86. So what this means is it doesn't matter what weight the athlete is lifting, the heel lift will affect them all equally. For the first independent sample t-test, we compared the peak acceleration difference to the closed kinetic chain ankle dorsiflexion. We divided the 2 groups at 40 degrees of closed kinetic chain ankle dorsiflexion because the functional movement screen uses 35 to 40 degrees of closed kinetic chain ankle dorsiflexion as their normal. We ultimately decided on 40 degrees because that was also our median, so then we had equal numbers in both the high and low closed kinetic chain ankle dorsiflexion groups. When we compared these two variables with the independent sample t-test, we found no statistical significance as our p-value was 0.17. For the second independent sample t-test, where we compared the peak acceleration difference to the weight lifted, we divided the 2 groups into the high and low weight lifted groups based on the median again, and the median was 320 pounds. When comparing these 2 groups with the independent sample t-test, we found no statistical significance as the p-value was 0.58.
So we did not find any statistically significant results supporting our initial hypothesis where we thought the addition of the heel lift would increase peak acceleration in the 90% 1 rep max back squat. However, we did find an overall increase in mean peak acceleration, which indicates that the addition of a heel lift has the potential to increase peak acceleration and therefore force production while performing a squat. Additionally, we did not find any statistically significant results supporting our second hypothesis where we thought that we would see the greatest increases in peak acceleration with individuals with low closed kinetic chain dorsiflexion. However, we were very close, and as you saw, we were trending towards certain significance, and we did find that weak negative correlation. And just to reiterate, the weak negative correlation indicates that the lower the closed kinetic chain dorsiflexion an individual has, the greater potential benefit the person has from squatting with the heel lift. And this is primarily due to the heel lift reducing the demands for dorsiflexion in the squat. And this negative correlation was supported by findings from Macram et al., as they demonstrated that by limiting the anterior translation of the knee and therefore limiting the amount of closed kinetic chain dorsiflexion available, there is negative impacts on biomechanics, such as increased forward trunk posture during the squat and reduced muscle recruitment, such as reduced EMG activity of the quadriceps. And finally, there was no statistically significant results when comparing the amount of weight lifted and peak acceleration. In fact, the two were essentially not correlated at all, which is an important point to bring up because it indicates that the amount of weight doesn't really matter when you are adding the heel lift into the equation. You could be lifting 100 pounds or you could be lifting 400 pounds. The individual has the potential to benefit from the addition of the heel lift equally.
Some PT implications for our study. The squat is a functional movement across the board. So whether you're working with an athlete or working in the geriatric population working on sit-to-stands, or someone who has to squat down and pick up boxes or something off the floor for work, teaching them how to do that efficiently. So taking a holistic approach when assessing a dysfunctional squat is crucial, starting from the ground up, looking at the ankles, knee, and hip. Specifically within our study, we looked at the ankle and how a heel lift would impact a squat. So therefore, our study has the potential to be generalizable to multiple patient populations. The first limitation we would like to discuss is the small sample size. While we had 24 participants, having more participants in our study would improve our effect size. Secondly, our data is not generalizable to other patient populations. However, we were okay with this because we wanted to look at how experienced weightlifters responded to the conditions that we were putting them under and therefore limit the variability. The questionable validity of the weightlifting analysis app that we used for tracking peak acceleration, there wasn't much research to back up this app, but due to our limited resources available, this is what we decided to use. And lastly, the lack of demographic information. While we knew the participants were between the ages of 18 and 26 years old, we did not actually obtain their actual age, height, weight, or position played. And what this would allow us to do is look at our data through different lenses and rule out any other confounding variables.
So for future research, we'd obviously like to use a more valid and reliable measurement equipment because there is better equipment out there, however we were limited by cost. Using better equipment would allow us to limit any variability or error that could have affected our results. We'd also like to generalize to non-experienced weightlifters because we used experienced weightlifters in our study. However, the effect of a heel lift could be different with lower technique levels or with the non-experienced weightlifters. We'd also like to analyze the effect of a heel lift with a maximum back squat. A lot of the research we were looking at comparing the squat with the heel wedge, we're using values such as 95 to 100% of a 1 rep max back squat. But ultimately, as this was a student-led research study, we wanted to limit the potential risk for adverse effects because we were introducing new variables such as squatting barefoot and squatting with a heel wedge. We also would like to analyze the effect of a heel lift with other movements such as the clean, snatch, and jerk or deadlift because these weightlifting shoes are used for more than just squat. The Olympic weightlifting community uses them for snatch and clean and jerk, and the powerlifting community also uses them for deadlift and squat. So in conclusion, our study found that a heel lift does not improve the peak acceleration of a 90% back squat. However, our study does suggest that there may be a negative correlation between the closed kinetic chain ankle dorsiflexion and the impact of a heel lift on the peak acceleration. We'd like to thank the Clark University football staff for allowing us to recruit from their football team for our study, and as well as the football players for participating in our study. We'd also like to thank our secondary reviewers, Nick Stager and Justin Glenn, for reviewing our manuscript, as well as Brad Menson and Lori Hyatt for helping us through this whole research process. Here are our resources, and thank you for listening.